Yes!
When you play a shooter game, the only thing on your mind is to be a savage on the front line, shooting up and destroying everything. Rarely ever does it come to mind for anybody to sit back and let everybody else do all the work or just play the supportive role in general. And I get it, believe me, because playing defensive roles and play styles in comparison to offensive ones sounds like a very, very unfun experience. But what needs to be understood is that every fire team needs a good healer or somebody that could provide some form of defensive support. The Guardian playing a supportive role is the most valuable member of the fire team because while everybody else is unloading damage into the boss, the supporter is providing everybody with the means to inflict all that damage via buffing the fire team and or debuffing the boss, for example. So today I want to let y'all in on the power and viability of the Dawnblade subclass tree known as Attunement of Grace, also known as Radiance, belonging to the Warlock class. Now if you wanted to learn how to play the support role, this is definitely the best way to learn how. In this video, I'll break down the abilities of this skill tree as well as some exotic gear suggestions. So with all that out the way, let's go ahead and get it in. The Radiance Super is the star of the show today. With bottom and top tree Dawnblade, you'll be slinging flaming swords at enemies to burn them to a crisp. But with middle tree, you'll thrust the Dawnblade sword into the ground to conjure a protective circular aura on the ground. This super is for support purposes only, but it's important to know that it's entirely possible to kill enemies with the sword slam that activates the super. Save for a few isolated incidents, enemy guardians in PvP and red bar enemies in PvE will always die if they're within proximity of the sword when you cast your super. Oh, and I want to mention that the Dawnblade sword itself can be destroyed, and if it does, the super will end immediately. Allies within the confines of this aura receive healing benefits and an overshield granting about 49% damage resistance in PvE, but only 20% in PvP, as well as a damage bonus of 25% to weapons and abilities. Again, in order to receive these benefits, you and your allies have to be physically standing within the well of Radiance. This super is the sole reason why the Warlock class is arguably the most useful class in PvE, especially in-game activities such as raids and Grandmaster Nightfalls. And it's guaranteed that if there's a Warlock in your fire team, they're definitely going to be running Well of Radiance at some point in time in the activity. The simultaneous benefits of increased survivability and buff damage that this super provides places it in a league of its own. Water Dawn's Weapons of Light provides a 30% damage buff to yourself and allies under its effects, but unless the Titan who cast the super is wearing Helm of Saint 14 to provide the Blessings of Light buff, Water Dawn provides zero protection to anybody outside of it, and you can't shoot through it either. So if you're inside of a Ward of Dawn, you can't do much of anything. However, if you're standing behind a banner shield of a Titan running Code of the Commander, you'll receive the Weapons of Light buff, and you can shoot through the banner shield, but the Titan casting the banner shield can't deal damage themselves. And when it comes to a boss encounter, it makes a huge difference in DPS when one person can't contribute. Since Well of Radiance provides healing and Water Dawn's Weapons of Light provides a better damage bonus than Well of Radiance, you'll commonly see Sentinel Titans cast their Water Dawn behind the Well of Radiance, and the fire team will deal damage from inside the well. So be advised that you'll be expected to run Well of Radiance during boss encounters if you ever use a Warlock in raids, just so you know. Divine Protection is the ability belonging to this skill tree that I find myself using the most. Now if you hold the button that your grenade is assigned to, your Warlock will convert it into a shining orb of light and will hold on to it until you release it or swap weapons. If you release it, you will throw a floating orb of light that provides healing and an overshield to you and your allies that pass through it. If you hang on to the grenade while in mid-air, you will float in place for 7 seconds. Whenever I run Attunement of Grace, it's common to see me throwing blessings all over the place. I'm always in the habit of paying attention to how much damage my fire team members are taking, so it's literal second nature for me to throw blessings at anybody in critical health or anybody surrounded by a ton of adds. The melee ability belonging to Attunement of Grace is known as Guiding Flame. Now when you melee an enemy, they take about 5 ticks of burn damage. Additionally, you and allies within proximity become empowered for 5 seconds. This perk doesn't specifically state how close allies have to be in order for you to receive the buff, but I tested it and found out that it's within 24 meters. And if you're most familiar with the Imperial system of measurement, that's almost 80 feet. And while empowered, you and your allies deal 25% extra damage for 6 seconds. Benevolent Dawn is hands down the most important ability belonging to this skill tree. It states that if you heal or empower allies, you'll regenerate melee, grenade, and rift energy. Benevolent Dawn regenerates abilities over 6 seconds, and once the 6-second timer hits 0, the increased ability regeneration benefits stop, and your abilities will return to their regular cooldown speeds. But as long as you're healing or empowering allies, the timer can be continually refreshed and doesn't have a cooldown of its own. And as far as I'm concerned, if there's any way that you could provide some sort of buff to your allies, this perk will proc. For instance, allies affected by your healing rifts, empowering rifts, and blessings will prompt Benevolent Dawn. It's important to note that the ability cooldowns are most noticeable when your fireteam members are standing in your rifts or well of Radiance, because the 6-second timer will pause for the entirety that your allies are standing within them. Your abilities will cool down faster the more allies you buff, so it's rare that you'll ever be without your abilities. The cool thing about Benevolent Dawn is that it can prompt from external sources as well, one of them being the exotic hand cannon Lumina's noble rounds, and shockingly enough, Benevolent Dawn procs even when you revive a fallen ally. Attunement of Grace has been out since like season 4, and I didn't find this out until season 10, so you can only imagine how I reacted when I found this out. Now there's a ton of synergy when it comes to the abilities of Attunement of Grace. Everything comes full circle, and Benevolent Dawn is the one perk that benefits from the others, because every time you use one of the other perks, you're proccing Benevolent Dawn. By now, there's at least one exotic that synergizes with each individual subclass in the game, and luckily, Attunement of Grace has a decent selection of exotics to choose from. While some of these exotics are specifically tailored to Attunement of Grace, others can be used on their own, but it's not a secret at all that their true potential is brandished if used in conjunction with Attunement of Grace. In difficult endgame activities such as Grandmaster Nightfalls, where survival is paramount, Phoenix Protocol is always my go-to exotic armor for Well of Radiance. Its exotic perk is known as Battle Hearth, a perk that increases your super energy gains from kills and assists made within your Well of Radiance. There's always been some confusion in regard to how Battle Hearth works, so I'll elaborate. A fireteam member and I are running Attunement of Grace, with Phoenix Protocol equipped, of course. My fireteam member casts Well of Radiance, and his super meters were charging more rapidly because he's the one that casts the super, but I don't receive the increased super cooldown at all. So yeah, you'll only receive the increased super energy gains if you were the one to cast the Well of Radiance. This exotic used to return even more super energy than it does as of presently, but it was nerfed several seasons ago alongside the other exotics whose perks revolve around rapid super energy regeneration. Phoenix Protocol lost its status of insanely powerful after the nerf, but it's still very useful. And it's always good to know that an exotic is still viable after being knocked down a few pegs. I mean, there isn't really any thought process required to get things going, because all you gotta do is sit in your Well of Radiance with your fire team and kill stuff. That's it. And even if you don't end up getting all your super energy refunded, you'll always be close to it. Since Phoenix Protocol relies on getting kills and assists, you won't get any use out of his perk during boss DPS phases, since you'll be dealing damage instead of laying waste to multiple enemies. Lunafaction Boots is a once great exotic that was the golden standard for the Warlock class for PvE. Once upon a time, if you had Lunafaction Boots equipped, you and your allies' weapons would reload automatically, provided that they were standing within a rift or Well of Radiance cast by you. But after a nerf, the auto reloading benefits were swapped in favor of granting weapon reload speed benefits comparable to that of Outlaw. Luckily, Lunafaction Boots retained the secondary benefit of increasing weapon range after the nerf, something that slug shotguns benefited from greatly after they joined the PvE meta. Admittedly, Lunafaction Boots barely sees any play at all these days, but it's still an amazing exotic nonetheless. But it's been several seasons since the nerf happened, and the introduction of a plethora of powerful weapons over the past couple of seasons and many more options to put together creative builds, there's little to no need for automatic reloading benefits, and the community eventually stopped caring. But once again, Lunafaction Boots is still a very solid exotic, and they definitely have some use. Starfire Protocol is one of my all-time favorite Warlock exotics, even back during the D1 days. Back at D1, all it did was provide an extra fusion grenade charge, but in D2, you would get that plus more. The Destiny 2 version of Starfire Protocol completely recharges your empowering rifts after defeating enemies with fusion grenades, and refunds fusion grenade energy from empowered weapon damage. Again, not kills, but damage. So you and your allies would simply have to deal damage to opponents while under the effects of any damage buff that comes from you. Starfire Protocol can work with the other Dawnblade skill trees, but it's a match made in heaven when used with Attunement of Grace. Now, Well of Radiance, Empowering Rift, Guiding Flame all count as empowerments. I enjoy using Starfire Protocol on boss fights the most. Since damage is constantly being dealt, there's never a point in time where I won't have any grenades. And throwing grenades between weapon swaps helps maintain a healthy flow of consistent DPS. This is even more beneficial if you're using a weapon that has the Demolitionist perk, because weapons with this perk will automatically have their magazines reloaded from the reserves after a grenade is thrown. I briefly mentioned this weapon earlier, but Lumina is a 140 RPM exotic hand cannon. Its exotic perk is known as Noble Rounds, and it states that kills with this weapon leave behind remnants. Absorbing a remnant converts your next hipfire shot into an ally seeking Noble Round and partially refills the magazine. Basically, when you kill something with Lumina, a white orb known as a remnant spawns where the opponent was defeated. Walking within proximity of the remnant will load Lumina with what's referred to as a Noble Round. You can carry up to 5 Noble Rounds, and when you hit fire Lumina at an ally, Lumina's second perk, known as Blessing of the Sky, will proc, and this perk states that using a Noble Round on an ally heals them and grants both you and them a weapon damage bonus for a short time. Blessing of the Sky lasts for 11 seconds, and you, as well as your allies affected by noble rounds, will receive a 20% weapon damage buff. Again, Lumina will only fire a noble round if it's hip fire, and luckily, your aim doesn't have to be perfect because it'll track whatever ally you fire it at. Like I said earlier, since Blessing of the Sky counts as a method of healing and empowerment, it'll prompt Benevolent Dawn, and if you use this weapon in conjunction with Starfire Protocol, your grenade will cool down even faster. Lumina's Catalyst is excellent because it spawns 2 noble rounds from every kill, instead of 1. The Catalyst drops randomly after playlist activity completions, and all you will need to do is get 250 noble round heals to complete it. I really only see Lumina as a PvE / support weapon because in PvP there are times where you'll encounter situations during gunfights where hipfire is more ideal because it takes a while to ADS your weapon, but this is very counterintuitive while using Lumina because in almost every instance you will inadvertently fire a noble round at your enemy and then it'll do absolutely nothing. So just stick to using Lumina in PvE. And last but not least, we have Boots of the Assembler. Probably one of the most fun Attunement of Grace exotics I've ever used. Its exotic perk, Blessing of Order, states that standing in a healing rift creates noble seekers that seek out allies that are not in a rift and heal them. Standing in an empowering rift creates noble seekers that grant both you and your allies a damage bonus. Each time a noble seeker finds one of your allies, the duration of your rift is briefly extended while you're standing within it. Okay, I'll break it down. All you gotta do is pop a healing or empowering rift, and up to 6 orbs of light known as noble seekers will spawn around you. The number of noble seekers spawn depends on how many people on your fire team and or instance, so only a maximum of 6 can spawn. Now whenever an ally passes by your rift, a noble seeker will follow him, and when it makes contact, it'll either grant a weapon damage buff or healing. Again, the benefit that the noble seekers bestow depends on if they spawn from a healing or an empowering rift. The noble seekers respawn every 6 seconds, and every time they make contact with an ally guardian, the duration of your rift will extend by 10 seconds. Provided that the noble seekers find a target, your rift can last almost forever. You'll be happy to know that Boots of the Assembler have some great chemistry with Lumina. Now if you have Lumina equipped and your noble seekers can't find an ally to heal or empower, they'll turn into noble rounds for Lumina, give you the opportunity to fire them whenever you want, instead of waiting for your fire team members to walk past your rift. Oh, and you guessed it, the noble seekers will prompt Benevolent Dawn. But then again, at this point in time, you probably weren't even surprised by that, because what doesn't prompt Benevolent Dawn? Seems like almost everything does because it responds so well to anything that heals or empowers. But yeah, it isn't necessarily mandatory to use Lumina in conjunction with Boots of the Assembler, but it's a lot of fun. So now that we become familiar with the abilities of Attunement of Grace, as well as the best exotics that support it, let's talk about the best playstyle for this skill tree. Your playstyle will more or less revolve around the exotic armor you have equipped. For instance, whenever I run Attunement of Grace, I focus on armor and mods with high intellect and discipline. A higher intellect stat reduces the cooldown of your super, while discipline does the same for your grenades. It isn't imperative to max out either one of these stats, but I definitely recommend doing so if you can, at least for intellect. A max intellect stat means that it'll never take longer than 3 minutes and 48 seconds for your super to fully recharge. Max discipline isn't as important because the endless possibilities of proccing Benevolent Dawn will ensure that your grenades are always available. Now, one of the most enjoyable things about immersing into the endgame is build crafting. And at this point in time, I have at least one build tailored to each of the endgame PvE activities. When I'm running Phoenix Protocol, my intellect stat is always maxed out. This is the most ideal route to take since Phoenix Protocol revolves around uptime of the Well of Radiance super, and a higher intellect stat means that you will be able to get your first super, and the Battle Hearth perk will ensure that your super will be available more often afterwards. Starfire Protocol grants 2 fusion grenade charges that'll recharge faster provided that you and your allies are dealing damage under the influence of any empowerment buff. As an Attunement of Grace Warlock, I'm constantly throwing blessing grenades at my allies to keep them healed and guarantee survival, but with Starfire Protocol, I'm able to abuse this even more. Benevolent Dawn combined with the grenade energy refund from empowered weapon damage ensures that I'll always have my grenades up. And as stated previously, I always throw both of my grenades during boss encounters just for that little bit of extra damage. And this is exactly what you should be doing too. At any point in time where you have a grenade, convert it into a blessing and throw it at your allies. They'll always express gratitude because in every instance, everybody is always taking damage. It's been a handful of times where I was able to save my fire team members from dying because my blessings were able to heal them just in time. Now, despite the fact that Attunement of Grace is a support skill tree, I'm very aggressive with how I play it. If I'm not throwing blessings everywhere, I'm casting rifts on my allies. I always tell my fire team members to pay attention to where my rifts and blessings are to ensure their safety and recharge my abilities faster. Standing inside of a rift will pause the timer of Benevolent Dawn, and the ability cooldown benefit will remain until an ally steps out of the rift and or if the rift disappears. I play the role of the medic constantly in motion, going from one ally to another, making sure that they are alive and healthy, and if need be, I melee an enemy to provide empowerment to an ally within proximity to help them take down adds faster. Playing the support role always seems like a boring job, and sometimes it can be a chore, but Attunement of Grace is the complete opposite, I promise you. Well, everybody that does it for this one, I hope that you found this guide to be useful. If you've never used the Attunement of Grace skill tree or the Warlock class at all, I highly suggest that you give things a spin in PvE. Who knows? Well, the Radiance could end up becoming one of your favorite supers. But yeah, if you made it to the end of this video and enjoyed what you watched, do me a favor and thumb rest to that like button until it turns blue. And if you're new to my neck of the woods, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and click that bell icon so you don't ever miss a video of the most elite gaming content. But with that being stated, 1LHD is over and out. Y'all take it easy.
Can redeem you and me. Don't you wanna feel something? And oh, I miss loving you, but I need to live my own truth. I wanna feel it all brand new. I found a little something from Miss Angelou. Take the good and hold it near to you, and let go of all the burdens.